Pedagogy and Practice in English Featured Speakers Series. I'm Amy Berger, the Executive Manager for Pearson's English Initiatives and Partnership Programs. I'm glad you could join us today, and I hope you'll find the ideas presented by our speaker valuable for your teaching. For those who are new to a webinar format, I have a few quick reminders before the session begins. If you're calling in by phone, please know that this is not a toll-free number. For that reason, we recommend that you select Use Mic and Speakers so you can listen toll-free through your computer. You may notice that your line has been muted. This is to minimize ambient noise as well as interruptions for our speaker. We encourage you to ask questions using the box marked Questions on the right-hand side of your screen. You can pose your questions at any point during the presentation, and when the formal presentation is over, I'll use the remaining time to collect up your questions and ask them of our speaker. Any questions we don't get to will be forwarded along with your email address to the speaker directly. If you want to keep up with the conversation on Twitter, follow @PearsonNorthAM and use hashtag PearsonLearn. Okay, so let's get started. Today's session is Teaching in the New Developmental Education Environment, Accelerated, Integrated, Contextualized, and Supportive. And our speaker is Dr. Donna McKusick. Dr. McKusick has served community colleges for over 30 years in both instructional and administrative capacities. Currently, she is Dean for Developmental Education and Special Academic Programs at the Community College of Baltimore County. In this position, she coordinates developmental education, academic support, learning communities, honors, and the libraries. She has degrees in English, reading, and education, including a doctorate from the University of Maryland in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis on academic literacy, and she has taught extensively in all these areas. She has also received her certification in developmental education from the Kellogg Institute at Appalachian State University. She has provided consultation, delivered presentations, and published articles on literacy, developmental education, learning communities, and closing the achievement gap in higher education. And she is the co-author with Dr. Al Starr of the textbook Making Sense, a guide for readers and writers, published by Pearson. A new edition of her book will be released in spring 2015. In this session, Dr. McKusick will begin by discussing how developmental education in reading and English at the college level has changed over the past 2 decades, and will describe a new paradigm which she calls the new developmental education, and provide a rationale for a change in philosophy and instructional strategy. She will then provide a window into what constitutes effective pedagogy in developmental reading and writing courses, and will provide instructional examples for lessons in acceleration, describing what backward curricular design looks like. She will then move on to integrated literacy instruction, again providing a sample lesson that demonstrates how precious instructional time can be saved by adopting an integrated literacy approach. Dr. McKusick will explain contextualization and provide ways to make learning more immediate and meaningful. And finally, she will demonstrate how to support learners with feedback that reflects research on grit and mindsets about intelligence. Donna, are you ready to begin?
Yes, I am.
Great, thank you.
So, hello everyone. I am very pleased to see you. I'm just getting my screen set right now. It'll just take a moment. Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about my background, a little bit more about my background as I am doing that. As Amy had mentioned, I have a degree in reading. I also have a degree in English, my first degree in English, and I have my doctorate in curriculum and instruction in integrated reading and writing. And I started actually at this community college, which was formerly Essex Community College, almost 40 years ago as a reading faculty member. And as the time went on, I actually started working in the field of developmental education. That was an emerging field at that time. a field that it took into consideration more than anything the whole student and the whole learner. And I became very interested in that aspect of developmental education that moved outside and above the separate disciplines of reading and writing and even math. I was the first president of the Developmental Education Association of Maryland, and I have been very committed to quality dev ed for my entire career. So I want to talk a little bit about why we even need a new paradigm to start out with. First of all, the roots of our new paradigm actually go back for about 20 years when companies such as Ellucian that created the Banner student information system and PeopleSoft became options for managing all of the student records that we had and pulling data on our programs. Before that time, we actually had no way of really measuring the success of students in our programs. Concurrent to that was the growth of the AccuPlacer. Many of you probably use that, and also the ACT Compass. And so we now had a new way of measuring whether students or determining whether students were college ready or not. Then another player that came onto the field not 20 years ago, but more like probably between 10 and 15 was the Community College Research Center. And they began researching the outcomes of community colleges. And since a major thing that we did was developmental education, they began to use college and statewide data systems to measure the effectiveness of developmental education. And so with the rising placements and the enrollments that could be now counted, there came a growing accountability for colleges in general. And of course, now that accountability is for college completion. All along this progression came statistical systems for measuring the effectiveness of DevEd and the use of regression discontinuity, which really looks at the progress of students who score just above or below cut scores in order to control for other variables. And suddenly DevEd had a bad rap. I think that looking at these large statewide programs made it very difficult to see smaller successes that were going on within the classroom. So why is developmental education looking so bad these days? And believe me, I don't personally think that it's all bad, but there is a lot of bad press. I want to say that one of the very first reasons is about student enrollment. Tom Bailey, in his working paper from the Community College Research Center, working paper number 14, said, data from the Achieving the Dream sample reveal this gap between referral and enrollment. And among the colleges in the Achieving the Dream initiative, about 21% of those students referred to developmental math do not enroll in remedial math. And within the 3 years of initial registration. For developmental reading, that comparable figure is about 33%. So a lot of students are enrolled, are referred, but they don't actually enroll. And then there are students who don't finish. They take the courses and they drop out. You know, we actually don't see a whole lot of failure in developmental education. Instead, we see students who don't complete. They don't complete courses and they don't complete sequences. And what happens to the students who don't complete sequences? Well, we know that the completion rates are across the country about 68% for developmental writing courses in which they enroll, 71% for reading courses, maybe only 30% for math, much, much lower. But this non-enrollment, we decided at the Community College of Baltimore County, we wanted to study a little bit more deeply. So we took a group of students from 1988 and we examined those students who had taken English 052, which is our upper level developmental course, in 1988 and 1989. And this is on the Essex campus. There were 863 of them. And see if I can get my slide going. So 57% of those passed. And that's not really that far off. 60% is a common pass rate for developmental courses. 43% of them never passed the course, ever, even if they retook it. Then we looked at the percentage that took English 101, our freshman composition course. That was 41%. And so see, already 41% of the original 863, we can see how these numbers are starting to go downhill. And then another 16% never took any more writing courses. And then how many passed the 101? 33%. So we're now into a third of the original students who started ever passed English 101. A lot of that was the result of attrition. Students not re-enrolling, even if they had passed, not re-enrolling in English 101, and of course the ones that didn't pass. And again, that's the significant number of 16% who never took any more developmental courses. So we started thinking about, and this thinking started about 2007, a new whole paradigm for developmental education. The old paradigm could be easily described by my first few days of work when I started in 1977. I actually taught reading in a lab where students sat at individual carrels listening to material. It was all self-paced material, decontextualized, how do you build a house with toothpicks, and they did multiple choice questions, and if they got them right, they rose up from one sub-skill to another. It was work your way up. We assumed that students needed every skill. We saw reading as a ladder of skills that students would have to climb up, and we only expected their performance at the rung where they were. We taught it in a very discombobulated way, in the sense that many of these students were in developmental writing at the same time, and they were being taught controlling idea. We were teaching topic sentence. The main idea would come up. They really got confused with the language, and we were conveying that the language of developmental education was very important, as opposed to the ability to read coherently and to understand and do something with what you read. So I remember that some of my early exams way back then asked students to define main idea or topic sentence. I, of course, don't think that that is so relevant anymore. They have to have a concept of it, but to be able to write a definition, I don't think so. Students were not taught in distinct cohorts back then. Many colleges had classes. At our school, it was almost heresy to bring the students together into a class. They were taught individually. We thought this was progressive, the department I came into. It was all teacher-based, and so my task would be to score these program materials. You know, it was sort of like the student was entering the developmental education hospital, getting a prescription. We would provide the medicine, score it, and they would move on. It was an RX model. And completion of that remedial course was the goal. Well, our new model really is completely the opposite. It start at the top and assume that students can do it, and then support them when they show that they can't do a piece of the whole. Maintain high expectations for students and make it a simple path to credit courses, one that's often called the prerequisite model, because remediation can actually be taken at the same time as developmental courses, and I'm going to show you how that works here at CCBC. The new model addresses the whole learner and recognizes that motivation is an enormous piece of this. Self-concept and models of intelligence are critical in belief systems, mindsets about intelligence and student success. The content is meaningful, it's relevant, it's contextualized, it has to do with the student's life. Cohort-based, we recognize that students get a lot of support from each other, and to waste a class by teaching students individually is really a crime, because students teach each other as well, and they have expectations of each other. And the support of the whole cohort is needed to move students forward. Student-based in the sense that it's all about the student's needs and not the teacher's needs. It's not about covering curriculum. It is about the student understanding and communicating, reading, and writing effectively so that he can or she can succeed in credit courses. And then those credit courses become the goal of DevEd, not success and remediation. So the new model has as its goal credit and degree attainment. So aspects of this new paradigm are that it's accelerated, it's integrated in the sense that skills, reading and writing skills in particular, are taught in an integrated fashion, can be taught in an integrated fashion. It's contextualized in that it provides a meaningful context for the learner, and it's supportive of the whole learner. Now I'm going to talk about acceleration for a few moments, and then I'm going to stop and take a few questions. There are a number of models for acceleration. These come out of MDRC, really great article by Liz Zachary. And she starts by saying developmental education avoidance by good test preparation might be the most effective method for acceleration that there is. The more we can do to have students do their best on the placement test, that is probably the most effective thing. I'm not going to talk about that today, but I do want to put it up there. Summer bridge programs have been studied extensively and have not gotten a very good review in the research across the country. However, I think there might be some new bodies of research that don't call them summer bridge programs, showing that programs just-in-time learning right before, right after the placement test, possibly before retest, can be effective. Modules and fast-track programs, I often call these 7 and 7 programs. It might be 7 weeks or even less on a developmental unit, and then another 7 or 10 weeks on a credit unit or on the second part of a next level up for remediation. The shortcoming of these programs is that when students fail the first part, often they have to wait out till the next semester, and in that period of time waiting out to start again, they've forgotten what they learned to start out with. So I question the efficiency of fast-track programs. Often, not always, they are individualized computer programs that do not take advantage of the great, what I call cohort power, the benefits of learning with other learners. And finally, there's the co-requisite model, and that is what I'm going to talk about for a little while next, and that is the model that we use for developmental English here at CCBC. So just to describe it, let's take this little girl, we're going to call her Amy, and the red baseball cap, and she joins 9 other students, developmental students, in a section of English 101, and then 10 college-ready English students. And there's her teacher up there, and already the stigma is reduced because she's allowed to take English 101. She's doing what she thought she was going to do when she began college, which was to start credit courses, so she's beginning to attach to the institution. There is a cohort. She's got the role models of the other non-developmental students in her class. Now there she goes, and we're also having her take another class that meets the same day, and it's English 052, and she's with those same students that she was with in English 101. And there's the same teacher again. This is a very important piece for us of the co-requisite model because the same teacher is taking that curriculum and expanding it across 2 courses. So there is a strong cohort effect going on. When you have only 10 students in the classroom, you can have conversations that you cannot have when you have 20 or 25. And your attitude is then changed about the developmental course because you're taking it to pass the credit course. You have a reason for taking it. You have individual attention in a class of only 10. If 5 of the students have issues with writing fragments, you can take those 5 and work with them together, take some time out to tend to those needs. You have time to address the non-cognitive issues, which are maybe the most important issues of all. And these range from anything from lack of organizational skills, can't attend, the students who are ADD and they get lost in a class of 30, the student who had to skip class because of daycare issues. You can have a discussion now with the other 9 students about that, and what do? Problem solve together. So there's a lot of time for this attention to non-cognitive issues. And finally, you can coordinate between the 2 courses. So really what we're doing in the English 052 is an extension of what we're doing in English 101. And what do? Everything possible to maximize the success of those students in that 101 class. They answer questions left over from the 101 class. They do a lot of writing, sometimes short papers that back up a discussion, sometimes short papers to prepare for what's going to be discussed in the 101 class. They will talk about ideas for the next essay. This is one of a big student problem. Students say, I don't know what to write about. And, if you give them an idea, you can probably easily teach them, not easily, but you can teach them how to use keywords to frame or limit that subject. But just having the idea to start out with is often a problem. Of course, most of this is theme-based learning, and we'll talk about that a little later on. But just running these ideas by other students helps them know whether they're good ideas or not. They review drafts. They do peer review in the 052 class. They do work on reducing the frequency and severity of error. And again, there's a lot of time now with only 10 students to pay attention to that in a very individualized way. They have a lot of discussion on how do you succeed as a college student and discuss other problems that might be interfering with the student's progress. So how do our students do? And this is from a study done at CCRC by Cho, Kopko, and Jenkins a couple years back of almost 600 accelerated students. And on the top, you'll see the progress of the traditional. On the bottom, the progress of the ALP students. And you can see that of the traditional students, 33%, just the same numbers we had from the 1988 study. Of the ALP students, 74% passed English 101. We were astounded when we started this. We started it with 5 sections, and we tried to double every year. We now have about 1,000 students doing this a year. And we were astounded, but this pattern kept repeating itself over and over again, and we realized that it was a pattern that was, and backed up with that study, truly attributable to the model that we were using. So why does acceleration work? Well, there's some theories. First of all, students begin with better self-esteem. They have more opportunity to affiliate, and this affiliation piece is a very big piece of Vince Tinto's research, affiliation with other students and affiliation with the teacher. Instructors can deal with these non-cognitive issues. They can provide this targeted instruction. And finally, that in this milieu, in this environment, instruction can be integrated. It can be contextualized and supportive. And I think at this point, what I'm going to do is stop and take some questions that you might have been having or thinking about. Let me just move this back. Yes. So I am ready to take some questions from the audience at this point. Hello, anything there?
No, I don't see the anything in the question pane yet, Donna. Sometimes it'll take people
like
a little
one
bit
more minute, and then we'll
to
just
get their
keep
thoughts together. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that a good many of you have probably heard about our OUT program. We've been doing presentations all over the country. We do have a National Center for Acceleration and Developmental Education here at CCBC, and we do go out to colleges through that center and do individualized work. I'm trying to get back to where we were. Yeah, individualized work with colleges who might want or need to hear more about acceleration. You know, one question that we often get is, we've heard people hear that this is only for students in the top level of developmental education. And that is true in terms of the top course level, but within our upper course level, and we have a 2-course structure for developmental education, we let any student who's interested take an ALP section. It is not dependent on an AccuPlacer score, and I really want to say that loud and clear to get rid of any myths that advisors have to look at scores and determine students who are, you know, best fit for this. We designed this to be simple for advisors, and so anyone who places in English 052 can go into ALP. They need no special permission. We knew that special advisor permissions would be the kiss of death for this program. Advisors love this program because they no longer have to deliver the bad news, oh, you're in a developmental course, and they can say, you're going to take English 101 your first semester, but we'd like to give you some support with that in the accelerated learning model.
Donna, there's a couple of questions have come in. The first is, you know, how are the attrition rates with acceleration?
Oh, it's amazing. You know, I saw this phenomena happen when I taught in learning communities as well, and that was one of the things that made us want to get into the learning communities movement. You would walk down the hallways at the 10th week and there would be nobody in the classes, and I was, earlier on in my career as a new teacher, thinking there's a big problem here. Nobody seems to care too much about it. I started doing learning communities, and I had students to the last day. And that's amazing if you're used to losing a portion of your class by the 10th week. Same deal with ALP. The students tend to stay. We might lose 1, we might lose 2. And of course, in a little class of 10, that's significant. But still, being left with 9 students, the community is still there, and they're still joining those other students in the 101.
Thanks, Donna. There's a couple of questions here that are, I think, more about the logistics of administering an ALP program. One is,
okay, maybe I can answer them real quickly and then move on.
Sure. How do you pay for the classes that only have 10 students per section?
Oh,
and
yeah, I should have
concerning
said this.
Teacher load, you know, does taking an ALP section count as a class?
Yeah, we used to count it as 2 credit hours, and the teachers thinking that there was only 1 class prep because it's really not that different than the English 101 prep. But the teachers didn't like that, and I can understand that. So we moved it back up to 3. We are able to do this because so many more students complete and go on to register for English 102. And we're a very big college, so we have proven through studies and cost analyses that this program completely pays for itself.
Hmm. Great, thank you. I'll put myself back on mute now, Donna.
Okay, and so let's go on and continue, and I will have the my email address at the end. Any of you can write me with any questions about this. I do respond. I am on vacation next week, but I will get back to you. So I want to talk for very, very briefly about integrated reading and writing and why this makes so much sense. You know, I was trained as a reading teacher, and reading is different than writing. It is not exactly the same, and I don't believe that any teacher can teach reading or anyone can teach writing. I think training has to be involved, but increasingly we have recognized that there is a common cognitive base behind both processes that has to do with the construction of knowledge. Both build on the world knowledge that we bring into reading and writing. Both are social. They are about communication of ideas to each other. And both have three common recursive stages. And those stages include preparation. Before you read, before you write, it might be surveying, it might be activating prior knowledge, it might be pre-writing, it might be brainstorming, constructing knowledge, the second phase, and that has to do with as we're working through a text, as we're working through writing or reading a text, matching that new idea that we're reading about or trying to express with our existing information and conveying it, and then revising, which happens over and over and over again in a recursive fashion through the entire process. And this is where we get into critical reading and critical writing, argumentation, and some of the more subtle areas. So a simple lesson that integrates reading and writing is college worth it, and this comes out of Chapter 9 of our new version of Making Sense with Integrated Reading and Writing that's coming out in the spring. It was a daring topic to choose, but we thought it was really relevant with all the student debts. And we have in that chapter students reading articles, reading tables, reading blogs. There's all kinds of authentic pieces for students to read. We have them writing essays, doing some research, writing letters to editors, doing fact sheets, and all at the same time for both reading and writing. They are learning about audience purpose, tone, inference, rhetorical devices, fact versus opinion, fallacies in reasoning, so forth. So there's quite a bit of opportunity here to cross from one area to the other. And this little chart shows you, again, a little summary of how those three stages work with reading and writing, those three stages being preparation, construction, and revision, and the kinds of activities that you might have with both. And these activities in class, you can go back and forth when you're reading and writing to doing both, all of these kinds of things. So, and this is also, you know, we used to talk a lot about reading for writing and writing for reading, and this is exactly what we're doing. We're reading from many sources. We try to emphasize authentic sources and authentic readings. In the textbook that is coming out in the spring, I would say 99% of that textbook is passages and text narratives, textbook chapters, articles from other sources. So they are direct. They're not teacher made up. You know, when you write this stuff, you realize how hard it is to actually find paragraphs that have main ideas in the first sentence. That doesn't actually happen except in reading and writing textbooks. So we want them to struggle with real materials. And then in the writing for reading, there's plenty of activities that can be done in response to reading, paraphrasing, summarizing, outlining, and again, the importance of authentic writing, the kinds of writing that the student will have to do as a college student. The goal of all of it being constructing knowledge, constructing new knowledge. So I want to move on for a moment to contextualization and then show you how these can all work together. So contextualization is a technique that connects academic subject matter with real-world situations and applications. And let me give you some examples here. Theme-based instruction, and this is certainly what we're doing in our textbook that will be coming out. Chapter 1 is about learning to learn. 2 is about learning in a technological world. 3 is about intelligence, models of intelligence, and so on. It's very easy to do theme-based instruction in integrated reading and writing. It's very exciting because reading and writing by itself you don't do it to do it, you do it to learn something else. Case studies are another way, often used in medicine and legal studies and business, and they promote application. For instance, an instructor might be doing a case study of the flu pandemic in the 1900s in this country in a public health course or a course about disease, spread of disease. Problem-based learning. This has become very popular, and Common Core has a lot of problem-based learning elements to it. An example might be in an engineering class, learning to create a wheelchair that will go over sand. Service learning, and service learning is very popular right now and very powerful for students because it helps them connect to the world they live in. Lots of application here with homeless shelters, soup kitchens, and so forth, helping students understand how the other side lives. I have summarized a lot of this in a paper I wrote for the League for Innovation called Making It Real, Using Contextualization for Student Success. It's a cross paper number 15, and it came out in March 2012. And so how do you do it? First, you want to look for some contextual opportunities, and with our developmental students, that's easy. The whole world is in front of them, particularly with minority students and students of low income. It's very important to choose topics that they can relate to that will accelerate their learning. And we do want to close achievement gaps. So that's the basis, actually, of culturally responsive instruction, trying to take a good sense of where your students are from, what is their background. If they're all steel workers, you want to connect that in a little bit, maybe not through the whole course, but a little bit with what they do every day in their world. Determine your method. Are you going to use case studies? Are you going to just use a theme? Are you going to create a single problem to be solved? Explicit transfer information. This is so critical. Our students often get confused between the context and the skill being taught when you contextualize developmental education. If you ask a student, for example, in a theme-based class that might be about addiction, they might say the class was about addiction, but it might have been a reading-writing class. It is important to always remind them that they are learning about reading and writing using that topic. Otherwise, they will get confused about this. I was going to tell you a story. I don't know if I have time. It's just about giving a group of students in a reading class an SQ3R type thing. I don't really do that, but it was a type of exercise asking them to take it from one of their other courses. And when I looked at the homework, half of them hadn't done it, and they all said, well, we thought we only did this in this class. We didn't think we had to do that in our other classes. So the transfer has to be very, very explicit. And finally, to determine how and what you will evaluate, be very careful about evaluating the strategies that you're teaching and not the content, because the students are not held responsible for learning the content. They're held responsible for communicating, for reading successfully about it and writing successfully about it. And you can do that with the use of rubrics and so forth. So here's a little integrated, contextualized series of lessons. Again, is college worth it? Preparing to learn. survey and read an opening passage from The Working Poor, a great book. Shipler describes the poor in this country who are working, and the narrative I picked, and this again is in our textbook, describes the sacrifices a refugee family in Vietnam made to send their children and themselves to college. And you could ask the students to discuss what the ticket to success in the U.S. is. You could have them actually free write about what are the sacrifices their own families had to make to send them to colleges, or what sacrifices are they willing to make to send their children to college. Kinds of resources, lots of journal articles on college debt. Banking, advertisements are a great thing to use to teach critical reading and writing skills. Pop-ups on the computer. I'm always seeing a pop-up that says, Obama wants you to sign up for college. And I'm pretty sure it's a come-on for something. I'm not sure what. Charts from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Here's an example of a fairly recent one, showing the earnings and unemployment rates by educational attainment. This whole context is very meaningful for our developmental students who are economically at risk. And so this is what I mean by contextualized and meaningful. But again, a whole series of integrated materials that can be used in the accelerated classroom. So a little bit more description on this assignment, and I think I already talked about these preparation activities you could do in constructing knowledge. You can always ask the students to annotate their reading as they read with in the margins. Talk to the text. That's what we tell them. Talk to the text. Use stickies if they don't want to write in their textbooks. Have them underline the transitional words and phrases. Maybe you teach modes, maybe you don't. But no matter what it is, it's still a rhetorical device to make an argument, and you can teach it in that way, comparison, contrast, definition, and so forth. Ask them to create a paraphrase from their annotations. This is all in constructing the meaning of what they're reading. For the writing, ask them to create a summary using now their annotations or paraphrases. Maybe focus on a single grammatical error. Do not say, and this comes into the part of this about teacher response, we find that it's really not very helpful to say, oh, this was so good, I'm going to tell you all the good things about your paper, and then give them the glass half empty. Actually, it starts out by sounding like the glass half full, but it becomes the glass half empty. Students are keen on this. They know what this is. They already know what you're doing. They're waiting for the second shoe to drop. It's much better to say right from the get-go, you did a good job, but there is one thing I really want you to work on, and I know you can do it. This is that messaging about mindset about intelligence, that it takes effort. I haven't talked much about that today, but it is a critical piece of delivering the non-cognitive piece of this. Okay, and finally we're at the revising, which is recursive. You're doing this as you read all the time. You're trying to figure out, this is what the reader does. He tries to figure out what the meaning is. He sees a key word. He sees a word that makes him change his mind or her mind. What can you do to get across purpose, audience point of view? Well, you can do a little mini lecture on it, and then you can have them comparing purposes, audiences, point of views between a chart, a blog, an article. You can have them write a letter to their college's financial aid office about the process of completing the FAFSA. Ask them to adopt several different points of view. Ask different students, one of them to have one point of view, maybe another to have a second, and then compare the results. Another kind of revision activity, ask them to go through the Shipler passage and extract 5 facts after you define what a fact is. Have them discuss the importance of those 5 facts to the meaning of the passage. Ask them in writing to use their information literacy skills to identify 5 facts about the DREAM Act, and then use them to compose an essay promoting an opinion about the act. So there's really all kinds of things you can do with this. I think I'm talked out for right now, and I'm ready to get a few more questions. We're almost ready to finish up this webinar. So, Amy?
Okay, we're going to just wait and see if we get some questions rolling in. I feel like doing the little timer thing on Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you still, here's a question, do you still also have a DevEd sequence as well as the ALP courses?
Yes, we do offer the traditional courses sections as well. We've been working very hard on this. There are some students who might want to come and they can only take 3 credit hours, 4 credit hours. So we are finding that we have to maintain a small number of traditional sections. There are also some students who come in and their math needs are more serious than their English needs. And in this case, want to start 3 semesters ahead of them often with developmental math, so we might want to start them there. So we do keep, and we have also an accelerated math program called AMP that combines courses. So we do keep sections, traditional sections open to fill in these scheduling challenges, but most, actually, of all of the students who are eligible for ALP are in ALP. There are some students who are not eligible because of other prerequisites or because of their personal schedules and so forth.
Thanks. Okay, so another question, are these courses taught by faculty with reading degrees or English degrees? What's the...
We have, we teach our ALP courses with faculty who mainly have English degrees. Also have a 5 credit hour integrated reading writing course for students who place in the lower levels of developmental reading and writing, and those are taught by both English and reading faculty who have been cross-trained in intensive about 30 hours of training, and then they meet in what we call a FIG, a faculty inquiry group, all semester to discuss what they're experiencing in their classes.
Gotcha. Could you review teacher training resources for integration that you've mentioned or haven't yet? Do you have maybe a reading list or some thoughts on that?
I don't think much out there. I have noticed that there are some states that are legislating integrated reading and writing instruction. There's actually probably more materials at the K through 12 level than at the college level. Our textbook will have with it a pretty extensive instructor's manual to go with it, but I can't say that I've seen a lot about the theoretical behind it, but I haven't seen a lot of training materials.
You know, and I would mention to you, Donna, and to the questioner and others, one of the resources that I work on at Pearson is an open access digital gallery of faculty development materials for English instructors, and the URL for that came up in the opening slideshow. But I will also send it out here through the chat feature. We have a lot of great resources on the website for integrating reading and writing. You know, a lot of it is video based, but there's also PowerPoints and some downloadable resources. So I'm going to enter that over here in the chat box, and there it is. Oh, Steve took care of it. How nice. So there it is. That's pedagogyandpractice.pearsonhighered.com. So it'll come back around. All right. Well, we are right at 3:50, so so the timing has worked out really well. If Donna, did your slide with your email address come up?
I'm not sure it did. No. I'm going back to the slide presentation. Can you see that? It has my information. It has the ALP website, has tons of stuff on it.
You know what we'll do, if you want to, it'll take us a couple days, but we are going to have a recording of this presentation, of this webinar, along with Donna's PowerPoint slides. So, and maybe Donna, if you want to add anything to that last screen with, in terms of references for folks, or however we want to handle that, we can put all that information. It'll be on Pedagogy and Practice. So in probably about a week. Well, a week will be Thanksgiving, so it won't really be a week. But right after Thanksgiving, if you want to visit the Pedagogy and Practice website, we will have Donna's webinar up there, and we'll put her PowerPoint up there with her email address for folks that want to get in touch. And that website also has a commenting feature, so if any of you want to share resources or share your thoughts on this or ask other questions, that'll be the spot to do it.
On this last slide, we do have the ALP website, and I have a link to the contextualization monograph that I did. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. And thanks, everyone.